1 Samuel chapter 28. In those days, the Philistines gathered their town forces to fight against Israel. Achan said to David, "You must understand that you and your men will accompany me in the army." David said, "Then you will see for yourself what your servant can do." Achish replied, "Very well, I'll make you the bodyguard for life." Now Samuel was dead, and all Israel has mourned for his and buried him in his own town of Ramah. Saul had expelled the mediums and spiritists from the land. The Philistines assembled and came and set up camp at Shunem, while Saul gathered all the Israelites and set up camp at Gilboa. When Saul saw the Philistines' army, he was afraid. Terror filled his heart. He inquired to the Lord, but the Lord did not answer him by dreams or Urim or prophets. Saul then said to his attendants, "Find me a woman who is in Medium, so I may go and inquire of her." "There is one in Endor," they said. So Saul disguised himself, putting on other clothes, and at night he and 2 men went to that woman. "Consult a spirit for me," he said, "and bring up for me the one I name." But the woman said to him, "Surely you know what Saul has done. He has cut off the medium of spirits from the land. Why have you set a trap for my life to bring about my death?" Saul swore to her by the Lord, "As surely as the Lord lives, you will not be punished for this." Then the woman asked, "Whom shall I bring up for you?" "Bring up Samuel," he said. When the woman saw Samuel, she cried out at the top of her voice and said to Saul, "Why have you deceived me? You are Saul." The king said to her, "Don't be afraid what you see." The woman said, "I see a spirit coming up out of the ground." "What does he look like?" he asked. "An old man wearing a robe is coming up," she said. Then Saul knew it was Samuel, and he bowed down and prostrated himself with his face to the ground. Samuel said to Saul, "Why have you disturbed me by bringing me up? I am a great distress." Saul said, "The Philistines are fighting against me, and God has turned away from me. He no longer answers me either by prophets or by dreams. So I have called on you to tell me what to do." Samuel said, "Why do you consult me, now that the Lord has turned away from you and become your enemy? The Lord has done what he predicted through me. The Lord has torn the kingdom out of your hands and given it to one of your neighbors, to David. Because you did not obey the Lord to carry out his fierce wrath against the Amalekites, the Lord has done this to you today. The Lord will hand over both Israel and you to Philistines, and tomorrow you and your sons will be with me. The Lord will also hand over the army of Israel to Philistines." Immediately Saul fell full length on the ground, filled with fear because of Samuel's word. His strength was gone, for he has eaten nothing all the day and night. When the woman came to Saul and saw that he was greatly shaken, she said, "Look, your maidservant has obeyed you. I took my life in my hands, did what you told me to do. Now please listen to your servant. Let me give you some food so that you may eat and have the strength to go on your way." He refused and said, "I will not eat." But his men joined the woman in urging him, and he listened to them. He got up from the ground and sat on the couch. The woman had fastened calf and the house, which she butchered at once. She took some flour, kneaded it, and baked bread without yeast. Then she set it before Saul and his men, and they all ate. That same night they got up and left. 1 Samuel chapter 29. The Philistines gathered all their forces at Aphek, and Israel camped by the spread of Jezreel. As the Philistines' rulers marched by their units of hundreds of thousands, David and his men were marching at the rear with Achish. The commanders of the Philistines asked, "What about these Hebrews?" Achish replied, "Is this not David, who was an officer of Saul, king of Israel? He has already been with me for over a year, and from the day he left Saul until now I have found no fault in him." But the Philistines' commanders were angry with him and said, Send the man back, that he may return to the place you assigned him. He must not go with us into battle, or he will turn against us during the fighting. How better could we regain his master's favor than by taking the heads of our own men? Isn't this the David's that sang about the dances? Saul had slain his thousands, and David his 10,000s. So Achish called David and said to him, As surely as the Lord lives, you have been reliable, and I would be pleased to have you serve to me in the army. From the day you came to me until now, I have found no fault in you. But the rulers don't approve of you. Turn back and go in peace. Do nothing to displease the Philistines' rulers. But what I have done, asked David, what have you found against you, servant, from the day I came to you until now? Why can't I go and fight against enemies of my lord's king? Achish answered, I know that you have been as pleasing in my eyes as the angel of gods. Nevertheless, the Philistines' commanders have said, He must not go up with us into the battle. Now, early, along with your master's servants, who have come with you, and leave in the morning as soon as it is light. So David and his men got up early in the morning to go back to the land to the Philistines, and the Philistines went up to the Jezreel. 1 Samuel chapter 30. David and his men reached Ziklag on the third day. Now the Amalekites had raided the Negev and Ziklag. They had attacked Ziklag and burned it, and they had taken captive women and all who were in it, both young and old. They killed them, but carried them off all they went on their way. When David and his men came to Ziklag, they found the destroyed fire with wives and sons and daughters taken captive. So David and his men wept aloud until they had no strength left to weep. David's two wives had been captured, Ahinoam of Jezreel and Abigail, the widow of Nabal of Carmel. David was greatly distressed because the men were taking of stoning him. Each one was bitter in spirit because of the sons and daughters. But David found strength in the Lord his God. Then David said to Abiathar, the priest, the son of Ahimelech, Bring me the ephah. Abiathar brought it to him. And David inquired to the Lord, Shall I pursue this raiding party? Will I overtake them? Pursue them, he answered. You will certainly overtake them and succeed in the rescue. David and the 600 men with him came to the Besor ravine, where some stayed behind. For 200 men were too exhausted to cross the ravine, but David and 400 men continued the pursuit. They found an Egyptian in a field and brought him to David. They gave him a water to drink and food to eat, part of the cake of pressed figs and 2 cakes of raisins. He ate and was revived, for he lost not eaten any food or drunk any water for 3 days and 3 nights. David asked him, To whom do you belong and where do you come from? He said, I am an Egyptian, the slave of an Amalekite. My master abandoned me when I became ill 3 days ago. We raided the Negev of the Kiriathites and the territory belonging to Judah and the Negev of Caleb, and we burned Ziklag. David asked him, Can you lead me down to the raiding party? He answered, Swear to me before God that you will not kill me on hand over to my master, and I will take you down to them. He led David down, and there they were scattered over the countryside, eating, drinking, and reveling, because of the great amount of plunder they had taken from the land of Philistines and from Judah. David fought them from dusk until the evening of the next day, and none of them got away, except 400 young men who rode off on camels and fled. David recovered everything the Amalekites had taken, including his two wives. Nothing was missing, young or old, boy or girl, plunder or anything else they had taken. David brought everything back. He took all the flocks and herds, and his men drove them ahead of the other livestock, saying, "This is David's plunder." Then David came to the 200 men who had been too exhausted to follow him and who were left behind at the Besor Raven. They came out to meet David and the people with him. As David and his men approached, he greeted them. But all the evil men and troublemakers among the David's followers said, "Because they did not go out with us, we will not share with them the plunder we recovered. However, each man may take his wife and children and go." David replied, "No, my brothers, you must not do that. With what the Lord has given us, He has protected us and handed over to us the forces that came against us. Who will listen to what you say? The share of the man who stayed with the supplies is to be the man at that time, that of him who went down to the battle. All will share alike." David made this statute and ordained for Israel from that day to this. When David arrived in Ziklag, he sent some of the plunder to the elders of Judah, who were his friends, saying, "Here is a present for you from the plunder of the Lord's enemies." He sent it to those who were in Bethlehem, Ramoth, Negev, and Jether, to those in Aror, Sibmoth, Eshtemoa, and Rechal, to those in the towns of Zeramelites and the Canaanites, to those in Harmah, Bor Ashan, attached said Hebron, and to those in all the other places where David and his men had roamed. 1 Samuel chapter 31. Now the Philistines fought against Israel. The Israelites fled before them, and many fell slain on the Mount Gilboa. The Philistines pressed hard after Saul and his sons, and they killed his son Jonathan, Abinadab, and Malchishua. The fighting crew fierced around Saul, and when the archers overtook him, they wounded him critically. Saul said to his arm-bearer, "Draw your sword and run me through, or these uncircumcised fellows will come and run me through and abuse me." But his arm-bearer was terrified and would not do it. So Saul took his own sword and fell on it. When the arm-bearer saw that Saul was dead, he too fell on the sword and died with him. So Saul and his 3 sons and his arm-bearer and all his men died together that same day. When the Israelites along the valley of those across the Jordan saw that the Israelites' army had fled and the Saul and his sons had died, they abandoned their towns and fled, and the Philistines came and occupied them. The next day, when the Philistines camped, they stripped the dead. Then they found Saul and his 3 sons fallen on Mount Gilboa. They cut off his head and stripped off his armor. And they sent messengers throughout the land of Philistines to proclaim the news in the temple of the idols and among their people. They put his armor in the temple of Ashtoreth and fastened his head to the wall at Bethsha. When the people of Jabesh Gilead heard of the Philistines had done to Saul, all their valiant men journeyed through the night to Bethsha. They took down the bodies of Saul and his sons from the wall of Bethsha and went to Jabesh, where they burned them. Then they took their bones and buried them under a tamarisk tree of Jabesh, and they fasted 7 days.